Hi, everybody. So this is our Faith and Science talk, which was requested by the group on Sunday. So I hope you enjoy it. And if you have any other questions or videos that you'd like me to cover, feel free to send those in. So when we talk about science, we are talking about how. How did the universe come into being? How did life come from non-life? How did we get water on Earth? Things like that. When we talk about religion, or if we talk about metaphysics, we are asking why. Why are we here? Why was the universe created? I don't know. Why do we like cheese so much? The why is our metaphysics. How science, why metaphysics or religion, okay? It tells us, religion tells us about who we are. Now, 13.7 billion years ago, our universe came into being. The most supported theory for how the universe came into being is a theory that came from George Lemaitre, who is actually a Jesuit Catholic priest. The Jesuits are very deeply involved in science, physics, all of those things. And the discovery came from George Lemaitre. And this is still held by most scientists today as what created our universe. Now, there is evidence on Earth for how our universe came into being, and there's evidence in space. However, the universe continues to expand. This is a difficult thing to explain because while the universe is expanding, it's not expanding into anything, but the galaxies are moving further and further apart. Interestingly enough, as the galaxies move further and further apart, we are actually losing evidence for how our universe came into being. Most physicists and most scientists will agree that our universe needed a beginning to come into being. What happened in the Big Bang is there was a lot of entropy, a lot of disorder, a lot of radiation, and everything heated up, poofed, exploded, and that is how our universe came into being. However, the biggest issue thwarting scientists is how did something come from nothing? Because you cannot simply have nothing and then suddenly have something. That's the biggest problem. They haven't been able to figure that out. And with the universe expanding, it is going to continue to become more and more difficult to figure out. Our universe has some extremely amazing things about it also. If you don't know what entropy is, I would encourage you to look it up. But entropy is essentially disorder. Things were very chaotic. After the Big Bang Theory, things were very calm in our universe. Everything was governed by these like unspoken rules, the rules of gravity, the rules of force, things like that. They follow a very particular pattern. And most of us take that for granted. You probably don't wake up and think, I really hope that when I'm driving to school today, gravity continues to work, because it just is. It's this invisible law that just continues to work. Now, when we talk about our Earth came into being about 4.5 billion years ago, 2.5 billion years ago, 2.1 billion years ago, somewhere in there. Cyanobacteria, which is basically like our first plant, came into existence. So what did that plant do? It took Earth, which was just carbon dioxide. There was no oxygen, and it began to oxygenate the planet. Then 540 million years ago, in a time period known as like the Cambrian explosion, a large number of multicellular species, what is thought to have everything else is to have evolved from, came into being. Scientists do not understand at this point how things started to live. Things started to live like 900 million years ago, 540 million years ago was the Cambrian explosion, but scientists still, they don't really understand how things began to live. The understanding is that RNA is the building blocks of life, but they don't exactly get, that's about as far as they've come. So we don't understand how is the science side, how things came into being. Now, 70 years ago, notice that I'm skipping people for a second. 70 years ago is when Darwinism and the theory of evolution were really taking hold. We were gaining scientific evidence that was saying, yes, we evolved. And at that time, the church needed to speak on, okay, well, what are we to believe? Are we to believe what the scientists are saying, that, specifically Darwin, that we evolved from these multicellular creatures, up into apes down the line? And what Pope Pius said, he came out and said, yes, you can follow science, because the book of Genesis, which is where our creation stories, remember, we've already talked about this. We have two creation stories that contradict each other. The creation stories are not meant to be a science book. They are meant to tell you the why, the metaphysical side, the why, not the how. And that is extremely, extremely important for you to remember when you're reading the Bible. When you read the Bible, you need to be asking the question, why? Not the question, how? It is not a science book. Imagine if I gave you, change this. 2,000 years from now, imagine somebody stumbled across the book The Hunger Games, which is a fake story about a post-apocalyptic society that has 12 districts. And those 12 districts have 2 people that compete to the death. It's a story about oppression. It is not a history book. But if somebody came and looked at it as a history book, they're going to have a complete misunderstanding of what they are reading. You do not take the Bible as the how, you take the Bible as the why. A lot of people end up losing their faith in God completely because they are told you don't believe anything outside of what's in the Bible, which means you had to believe that man was created before the first plant, which didn't happen. People who wrote the Bible, you need to understand that there is a human author involved in the Bible. The people who wrote the Bible were trying to understand where they came from, why they were here. So they were writing their myth. Now God works through those stories to tell us why. It is not a science book. There's actually a museum in Kentucky that people made because they were so bent on the Bible being a science book. So they have dioramas of Adam and Eve in the garden with dinosaurs. That's not how any of it happened. You are perfectly free. Pope Pius says you are perfectly free to follow the science. What he did say, though, is you follow the how with science, you follow the why with God. Basically what that means is inside of you, you need to have the understanding that who you are is more than just a pile of cells. There is something deeper in you. And that was what we talked about in the past about being made in the image and likeness of God. You have this amazing awareness. You have, there's something very special about you. Now, when we talk about us, the most modern ancestor that we have was somewhere 100,000 to 80,000 years ago. So if we're looking at this timeline of, from the time our Earth started to begin to us, we are just a tiny little tick on that timeline. Now, so when modernity hit us, when we became modern humans, something really crazy began to happen. We changed. There was a shift in us where these new modern people immediately began worshiping. We created things to worship, usually out of stone, or we worshiped parts of the earth, and we began preparing our dead for the afterlife. Something ingrained itself within us at the exact same time that we developed language skills and syntax skills, that there was something outside of ourselves. Nothing taught people there's something greater than you. But at our evolution, we became aware of it. And there is a Jesuit priest who argues that that is the moment that you received your soul, that people received their soul, was at that point in evolution when we became modern people, the type of people who are described in the book of Genesis, being made in the image and likeness of God. So people just developed with this ingrained sense that there's something beyond themselves, and that when somebody dies, they don't permanently die. So they prepared them. There's amazing historical stories about, the Egyptians and people like that, that when somebody died, they would bury them with their pets because they were like, okay, that person may be dead to us, but they're going to want their pet in the afterlife. Or they would bury them with, if they were really high up and they had slaves, they would bury their slaves alive with them because they're like, they're going to need them on the other side. There is just this understanding within people that there's something else out there, which is truly amazing. Now, there are neurologists, neuroscientists that study the human brain. Something else that happened within our human brain at that time of modernity is prayer actually, so it works with your prefrontal cortex and what is it called? The posterior cortex, I believe, which is the areas that are involved in self-reflection and self-soothing. Now, so essentially what this does is when you engage in prayer, it relaxes the body, It can heal parts of the body. It can heal your cells by calming you down, and it deactivates the action portion of your brain. So people who pray, especially in difficult situations, become more calm and more grounded. For whatever reason, when people evolved to being who they are today, prayer was something that evolved to change them. It is something genetic within you that when you pray, it alters the way that you're thinking. It alters the way that you react to problems. They did these amazing studies too with alcoholics. What they did is they did brain scans of alcoholics. So an alcoholic is somebody who is literally addicted. They cannot just stop drinking. They are addicted. Their brain needs alcohol. And what they did is they would show alcoholics images of alcohol and watch which areas of their brain lit up. Then they would ask the people to pray while looking at the images. What actually happened is while these people were looking at the images, their activation portion of the brain portion that tells them to go do something, the action portion, began to shut off. It began to calm down because people have something biological within them that evolved with them that not only predisposes them to looking outside of themselves, looking to something greater than them, but also something that actually relaxes and heals them. So that would be a huge challenge for you if you don't already do that. When you are in a stressful or difficult situation, try praying. Try praying, bring yourself back to a calm place, and see how that changes your reaction in the future. Now, the last thing that I want to touch on, and which I know this is a longer video than normal, is there's a beautiful connectivity within nature also that needs to be paid attention to. We talked about the cyanobacteria, which, so we had a oxygen-free planet. It was just carbon dioxide. Cyanobacteria began living, don't know how, scientists don't know how, and it oxygenated the entire world. And then creatures came into being on that same planet that breathed out carbon dioxide. So where the cyanobacteria, where the plant life created a place for oxygen breathing creatures, those creatures then began to create a safe place for the plants to continue living. We have that relationship with each other, that connectivity. And, where I breathe out, the plants are able to breathe in. When I breathe in, it's because the plants are breathing out. Last thing, to really look at the full connectivity that you have with the universe, every single one of us, in order to carry that oxygen through our whole body, we have iron in our blood. We have this hemoglobin in our blood. The only place that iron comes from is from exploding stars. So within you, within every single person, is star explosions from outside of the universe. That is the only way that your body is capable of carrying oxygen and allowing you to live. The connectivity is amazing. So this video went a little longer, 13 minutes. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you all next week.